Hello, everyone. Welcome to this regional roadshow presentation from SBE Australia. My name's Kim McGuinness. I am Strategic Relationships Director at SBE, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today. We have a few housekeeping things that I need to talk to you about before we get going. And the first one is to keep yourself on mute if you can, because obviously background noise interferes greatly with the quality of the presentation and the speaking. If you have any questions along the way, do type them into the chat. We've got representatives from SBE and our partners all able to answer your questions. So any questions for the panel specifically, please type panel in capital letters before your question and we'll get to as many as we can throughout. So to chat to us or any of our partners after today, do send us an email at info@sbeaustralia.org and we will direct you to the most relevant person or the most relevant company. And please know that every funding journey is unique. So what works for you may not work for others. And the information shared today is of a general nature and is not designed as specific advice. We're honoured to have the Minister Mary-Ann Thomas, the Minister for Agriculture and Regional Development, to welcome you today and do our acknowledgement of the most beautiful country on which we stand.
Hello and welcome. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all gathered. I'm joining you today from Tangarang country, and so I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and to acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be joining with us today. It's wonderful to be here with you, even if it is virtually, at the opening of the SBE Regional Australia Roadshow. Since its launch in 2013, SBE has been helping accelerate women-led businesses across Australia with access to tools, to networks and to knowledge. And it's fantastic to see SBE extending this network to regional Victoria and participating in the Digital Innovation Festival. It's no secret that female founders face a range of unique challenges. A 2019 study, for instance, revealed that only 19 of 104 Victorian startups that had received angel or venture capitalist investment were founded by women. But women-led businesses are on the rise and they are our future. In Australia, over a third of small businesses are owned by women and it continues to grow. While there's no doubt that the global pandemic has been a challenge, it has shown us that location is no longer the barrier that it once was. Global businesses can be as readily launched in our lounge rooms as in boardrooms. Spending so much time in regional communities over the past few months, I've been amazed by the female entrepreneurial talent that exists across our state. From chocolate makers to cheese makers, from cybersecurity specialists to digital creatives, we've got so much talent just waiting to be unlocked. I encourage everyone who is here today to join the conversation and seek the advice you need to take your business forward. Organisations like SBE have an important role in supporting women-led businesses to bring their ideas to market in a smart and a sustainable way. And that's why the Victorian Government is proud to support Launch Vic. It's our own startup agency, which in turn has supported SBE with several grants, including $1.5 million in 2018 and a further $300,000 last year for the Female Life Sciences Accelerator Program and the Evolve Program, of which today's Regional Roadshow is part of, and $250,000 to deliver Explore SBE's Pre-Accelerator Program to help Victorian female founders to take their ideas from the ground up and bring them to market. Over the next 2 years, over 40 female entrepreneurs will graduate from SBE's Pre-Accelerator programs, helping these women to launch and scale their businesses. I hope that some of the outstanding women who are in the audience today are among those alumni, and I look forward to following the progress of this important and much needed program. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to join with you today. Bye.
Thanks. Just, I don't know if anyone else, I can't see a screen or a slide anywhere. I've still got half the video, so I don't know if that's just me, but
I did too.
I just wanted to welcome everyone. My name is Kerry Lee Sinclair. As I was just introduced, I'm chair of SBE Australia, and thank you so much for coming today. It was our intention and part of the strategy to spend some time out in the region, and all of the people on the call had graciously agreed to be in the regions for an in-person event. So obviously COVID continues to be a challenge, and so while we are running a virtual event today, we are still intending on coming out and visiting everyone as soon as we can. At SBE, we believe very strongly in our values of the human connection and that there's a network of other women who have been there, built that around women as they grow their businesses. And part of that connection is the human connection of getting to spend time with people and build more than just a virtual relationship. So please accept our obviously understandable apologies, and we do look forward to seeing you sometime in the future, hopefully in November. Now, we'd like Minister's comment, so I'd like to introduce the Honourable Jala Pulford, who's the Minister for Innovation, Medical Research and the Digital Economy. Thanks.
Hi and welcome to the Digital Innovation Festival. DIF's an exciting Victorian government initiative that brings together people to connect, collaborate and learn about digital tech and innovation. It runs for 2 weeks. Innovation drives growth across every part of our economy and makes Victoria one of the greatest places in the world to live, work and do business. Our local innovators are responsible for some of the world's major advances in technology, medicine, manufacturing and science. Things that are now part of our everyday, at home, at work, at school, and everywhere in between. Our position as an innovation leader is firmly established, and the Andrews Labor government is committed to working with people just like you, Victorian businesses, entrepreneurs, individuals and communities to drive economic growth and create new and exciting opportunities for Victoria. I hope you enjoyed today's event, and be sure to check out the other events taking place over the course of the Digital Innovation Festival. Hopefully next year we'll be able to do some of these events in person, but for now, stay safe and stay well and enjoy the online DIF that is the 2021 festival. Take care.
Thank you, Minister Pulford and Kerry Lee. On behalf of the SBE Australia team, thank you for attending today. Your commitment to growing a strong business, seeking out relevant networks and a willingness to learn will set you apart and ensure your success. We couldn't have brought this event to life without the support of our wonderful partners who are all invested in you. They're committed to you, so do reach out to them. We're thrilled to be a part of the Digital Innovation Festival, along with Commerce Ballarat's B31 program, and extend our sincere thanks to LaunchVic, the City of Ballarat, the City of Bendigo, Runway Ballarat, AFS Chartered Accountants, B Bendigo, Oak Magazine, The Rural Woman and High Profit Media. We'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the partners that support SBE Australia generally. As a not-for-profit, SBE relies on support from government and corporate partners, so we're very grateful for your support as well. Now I'd like to introduce our fantastic panel, and I know you've all been waiting to hear from them. I've enjoyed hearing the stories and the learnings and the advice from these women on the lead up to this panel, and I'm certain that you will as well. Our first panellist and the lady that you met before, Kerry Lee Sinclair, is the chair of SBE Australia, and as an alum of our program in 2000, she's been involved since the very early days of SBE in Australia. Kerry Lee has over 15 years experience working across the high growth ecosystem, from co-founding her own startup to working with some of Australia's leading tech businesses. She recently has moved into leading technical investment and venture capital within a family office. An active innovation ecosystem participant, she also sits on several scale-up company boards as well as several investment committees and investment and industry advisory boards. Danielle is founder and CEO at Carista, which is the Match.com of the disability care industry. Danielle is an entrepreneur with a vision to impact 1 million lives by 2025. The mission is to connect an individual with the best team the first time and that the provider builds a sustainable business. Danielle is a passionate founder who has delivered her pitch over 200 times and has learned a thing or two in the process. Claire Leach founded Hatch in 2016. Previously the Director of Development at a food rescue charity, Fair Share, Claire is passionate about sustainable solutions for the world's growing waste problem. And reading about innovative companies overseas using insects to convert food waste into livestock feed and fertiliser, she was hooked. And she decided to implement the same system here in Australia. Hatch was a founding member of the EVO Consortium, which assists black soldier fly companies all around the world. Georgia Beattie is a serial entrepreneur with a mission to create better products for a sustainable future. Georgia has started businesses in food, manufacturing and technology. After witnessing manufacturing practices from a young age in her own business, Georgia realised that although millennials are buying products, they're not in leadership roles within the companies that produce these products. Georgia's personal challenge is to help create 10 new conscious food entrepreneurs every year. All of these women, all of these founders are creating important businesses that serve, not destroy. All of these women have sought out advice, networks and support to do it. Also on the panel today, we have Rebecca Rosenzweig, who wears many hats. She's responsible for overseeing the Alice Anderson Fund at LaunchVic, which is a $10 million sidecar fund supporting women-led startups. She's also the principal consultant at Thinky Advisory, where she works with powerful and purposeful organisations to make sense of complex issues, develop tailored funding strategies, and tell stories that inspire positive action. In addition to this, Beck is Director of Capital R, which backs founders and organisations that champion a strong and deliberate intersection of profit and purpose, both fundamental to producing sustainable positive outcomes for people and planet. Justine Minnie has worked at Bendigo and Adelaide Bank for over 25 years, and she's seen it all when it comes to funding structures and building business. She's had the ability to observe the behaviours of successful founders, which businesses are successful or unsuccessful in their funding journeys, and what elements actually do make difference. Linda Wong has had an incredibly broad career. She has seen she's had the privilege of working with many founders through her role at Runway. She's seen what works and has sound advice for any business owner. Over the years, Linda has continued to work with her three passions, which are people, learning and horses. And she's now been able to combine all of these via the establishment of one charity organisation and I think another one as well, Hands of Change Limited in 2016, her role at Runway and her PhD studies at Deakin University. And our moderator today is Kimberly Furness. Kimberly is the founder and editor of Oak Magazine, which is an independent print publication dedicated to female entrepreneurs and women in business in regional and rural Australia. Kimberly has reported on many founder stories over the years and was the perfect choice to lead this fabulous panel. Enjoy their insights. Over to you, Kimberly.
What an incredible panel. Do you know what? Let's just get straight into it, I think. So all our panelists have been waiting patiently, and I thought we could kick off with the question, sort of go to the start and ask, what does a founder need to think about before they decide on a funding model? So I was thinking, Danielle, did you have, some words to say about that, a little bit of knowledge and insight that you could share with us?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll share my experience, but also some of my learnings. So I raised about $500,000 pre-launch. In fact, I didn't even know what the business was called at that stage from friends and family. And then I went out and outsourced and built a platform that cost us a lot of money. And then I put the team together. We raised a bit more money. We've raised about 1.7 million to date so far. And that is friends and family along the way, multiple raises, or just to be honest with you, it's kind of been fluid. We've had people invest a number of times over time when I guess they've wanted to. What I will say is that I probably would have considered maybe generating some revenue or even getting a platform, a testing platform done first, and look to raise or generate money through revenue in the first instance, if at all possible. I mean, I'm a salesperson, so I that on reflection might have been a good idea. But thank you, Isabel. I've got a 5-year-old in the background just giving me paintings. Yeah, I guess my learning is that raising funds at an early stage takes a lot of time, and I could have possibly spent a little bit more time on the business. So what we do at Carista is match people with a disability with service providers, and I had a lot of background or experience in the segment before, and I had lots of customers who in fact became investors. So for me, one of the key learnings which I did and I didn't do is generate funding through revenue, but I think you really need to think about what you want to do with your business and whether or not you need to raise money and when you need to raise money, because what it will do is dilute you over time. We're just about to go into a Series A raise, and over time, as Kim had mentioned, I've pitched lots and lots of times, so that's something you would have to get used to. So I've pitched hundreds of times. I feel like I'm pitching all of the time because you're pretty much raising all of the time. And one of the key things that I get asked now for more than anything is the numbers. So the P&L, the forecast, the balance sheet, etc. So you've got to know your numbers. I know how many subscribers I've got at any point in time, how many referrals are going through the system every single week. You've got to know those numbers. Otherwise, you're asking people to invest in something that you haven't got enough knowledge in. Remember, they're investing in you. So they're always going to refer to you and refer to how well you know your numbers and how well you know the market. And they will judge from that whether or not you're worth investing in. So really my message is around knowing the numbers, having a really clean, slick deck, know market size, and be able to communicate it really well and really quickly. Remember, they're only going to remember 2 or 3 things out of the conversation that you have.
Absolutely.
So that's my learnings.
Danielle, when you just said you pitch, say 200 times, what percentage are you actually landing? Can I ask that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we've got around 30 angel investors, and they are friends and family. So it's a group of people I knew from the industry. It's my dad, my sister, etc. And then I met a gentleman called Paul who's on my board, so it's just myself and Paul, and he goes out and he plays golf with his mates, and they've got like this Carista crew who have all invested in Carista and love Carista and give me advice, some of them entrepreneurs, etc. So I've had success with about 30, but we have got interest now, and what I would say is those couple of hundred pitches that I've made over time, I've pitched time and again, and I think one of the biggest investments is yet to come, and they've probably been in the mix along the way, and I don't know who it's going to be, but the multiple pitches along the way and showing the journey, and we've got great traction thanks to our amazing team, to go back and say we hit the milestones even despite COVID, is what some of these kind of Series A family offices, private equity firms want to see and hear over time.
Brilliant.
So it builds the trust, and it shows that you're persistent, and that, again, that you know your numbers and you can hit those milestones.
That's great. Let's hope restrictions lift so we can get Paul back out on the golf course, I think. Now, I mean, there's so much to know about business, and a lot of us go in with no knowledge at all. Claire, could you speak to, what you need to know and where you could find that, or really, do you not need to know everything? I suppose that's a catch-22. Claire, you might have to unmic.
Sorry.
Perfect.
I was coughing before and I thought I better mute. I think one of the things I've learned a lot. Firstly is that nothing is going to happen overnight. And, I think that's something that we've all heard, that this is the overnight success that's been 10 years in the making or whatever. And I think that's really true. And it's a mindset you've really got to allow yourself to feel comfortable with. And as Danielle said, you're also developing relationships when you're developing your funding and your business. So you might end up speaking to the same amount of people a number of times. So don't ever burn bridges. Don't go, oh, I can't believe you didn't like my pitch or whatever, because what they're going to do is give you some feedback, and then you can go back to them in 6 to 12 months time when you've got that information that they felt you were lacking or whatever that was. So you're really looking to develop your own experience, because, for example, for us, we rear insects on food waste. And that's my new career. That's certainly not my what I've been doing for the last 20 years of my life, but that's my expertise now. So my expertise is not fundraising. I'm not an investment person. I'm not a VC. I'm not in a family office. And I think it's really okay to be comfortable with your lacking of understanding in those areas as well, because the last thing you want to do is, when you speak to these people, is try and pretend that you know it all, because that's going to be pretty clear when you don't. Even terms like Series A funding, seed funding, it took me so long. I was reading so many online things. Where am I? Am I seed? Am I this? Am I that? It's really okay just to talk and ask those questions when you're speaking to people. So a lot of your fundraising journey is going to be about networking. It's going to be about finding the pools, finding those people that like what you do and can give you advice along the way. They may not be people you're looking to get money from, but they will help connect you to people. And also for us, I feel so much pain when I hear Danielle say she's done 200 pitches. I can't fathom having to do that. And fortunately, I haven't had to do that yet. I've done a few that some have gone well, some have not, but I haven't actually raised money that way yet. The way we have raised money is through our strategic connections. So building those strategic connections and thinking, well, okay, our business is in waste and animal feed. What are the companies that are likely to be interested in that? Trying to get into those companies at the executive level, because often you can get you might get an in at a lower management level or something, but they don't tend to push it to the right levels for those strategic conversations. So, and that can take time. So just it's perseverance. It's figuring out where your energy is the best spent targeting. So doing your research on who are your best strategic customers, because at the end of the day, or partners, because they might be the ones that want to buy you out and just include you in their business. Or else help you expand because they want to utilise your services. Also, what we've found is we've really done a lot of work with government grants. I'm fortunate that I've had some experience with, I used to work for a food rescue charity in my previous career as head of fundraising. So I had a lot of time and experience to learn about grant writing, which is a bit of a skill. But we've had a lot of success with government grants, and I know a lot of people don't even bother looking at them because they do take a lot of effort. But if you can find a grant that works for you, be it federal, state, regional, whatever, there's a lot out there. It's free equity, and the government are very supportive. So once you get into that grant system, they're very supportive. They are great with helping you with connections and networking because they want you to succeed growing your business.
Wow, that's great advice. I love it. Georgia, I would like to call you a local. I'm based in Bendigo. You have 3 farms, Diggers Rest, Harcourt and Bridgewater. So I'm going to claim you as a local. Can you share with us your experience of, deciding on a funding model?
Yeah, and I guess if I was to summarise sort of the path I'm going down at the moment, is just to really think about who you're taking money from. And so I started my first company when I was 21 or 2, and I was straight out of uni. But I raised just over $1 million straight out of uni. So don't let age or experience deter you from having a good swing at raising capital. But I mean, super naive, and I really had no clue, and still don't have much more. I have a little bit more of a clue now, but I really didn't think about who I was taking money from, and so I had 2 parties. I had an international sort of family office, and then a local company that wanted to work with me, and so they saw the investment as complementing their existing family business, and so so what happened is I actually outgrew that company very quickly. Like within the first 9 months, we expanded into Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and China very quickly into from a sales perspective. So my biggest lesson on that first business in capital raising is be careful who you're taking the money from, and really talk to them about what their expectations are of you. Absolutely, you need the return on investment. But then are there other things that they're looking for within the business? So I ended up having to sort of buy them out at quite an expensive price, really, before then exiting the business sort of 5 years later. So that was it was a bit of a hindrance for our growth as I was going through that process. It's very distracting if you don't have the right partners on board, which is why just do your due diligence up front. Set your intentions before you're going out and pitching. And I'm pitching, 5 times a day. I consider yourself pitching to a new manager that you're wanting to get into your business, or for me, I'm pitching to Coles and Woolworths regularly. And then also from an investment perspective. So pitching is really, really important, which is one of the things that I will value for the rest of my life with going through the springboard process. I really learned how to do that properly. And then so now I was in tech, and now I've sort of moved into agriculture. And so for that, I was really careful. I wanted a long-term partner. And so I've now got this farm, but I was looking at how do we have international relevance and really scale and be the biggest in the country. And so I needed a multinational kind of partner. And so we just last week closed that deal. I was celebrating with your chair last week over Zoom. And so that is it was a very intentional, this is where I need to go. What's the kind of partner that's going to help me get there? And so that's my sort of intention with this business. It's very different working with a corporate though. They're much slower. There's lots of rules. And so every partner's got its pros and cons. You just need to be super conscious of it.
Absolutely. I love how both, Danielle, Claire and yourself, you've all spoken about, just going back again and again. So you might get that one no, but it doesn't mean that door's closed to you. You just got to sort of, keep trying on the handle and see how you go. If our audience do have any questions for our panel, we will open it up. So in the chat box, type in panel, ask your questions, and we can get to those at the end. Now, storytelling is incredibly powerful. It forges connections among people and between people and ideas. How do we construct our story in a way that gets investors and partners on board? Rebecca, did you want to share with us an example, or, what are the little nuances that we need to know about?
Sure. I think firstly, I echo everybody's sentiment about taking a really long-term approach to getting investors and partners on board. It's really about relationship building, and all good relationships are, the result of hard work and don't happen overnight. I think in terms of constructing a good story, you really need to know who your audience is, and you need to tailor your approach to that specific audience. And you really need to be able to show what you offer and why you are different. I think I like to keep Simon Sinek's golden circle in mind when I'm crafting a story. So if anyone hasn't read his book or seen his TED Talk, I highly recommend it. The basic theory is that people don't as much mind about what you do. They care a lot more about why you do it. So when you go from explaining what you do to being able to explain why you do it, you're able to build more emotional connection. So you don't just want to talk about your product. You want to talk about why you're doing it. You want to embrace your founder story and be able to build those connections that really resonate with investors and with others. I think, in terms of us here at LaunchVic, LaunchVic was established by the Victorian government as an independent agency responsible for growing the startups ecosystem. And we really focused on supporting programs that build founders, investors, and the general ecosystem at large. And so I would encourage people to get involved with some of the programs that we support, some of the pre-accelerator and accelerator programs like SBE and Runway, and Atto and Scalata, to name a few. I think, honing these skills and storytelling techniques is something that, is covered in all of the pre-accelerator and accelerator programs. And, it's practice. It's practicing not just, out there on investors, but it's practicing with circles of people that you trust, and and taking on that feedback, and changing your pitch slightly and seeing what resonates and what doesn't.
Yeah. Just as Danielle said, keep going back 200 times or more. Doesn't matter. Just see how you go. Justine, I wanted to ask you on this question as well. Given that you're probably on the other side of it, do you see a lot of pitches come through? Like, what makes, a good story, or what makes a good pitch, do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. And we do see the good, the bad, and the indifferent, really, with lots of these things. And where we see the greatest success is those who are better prepared, who have a really good understanding of what their story looks like. They're confident in sharing their story. They've got trusted advisors around them as well. So they've got people that they're asking questions, that they're seeking advice on, and also got people that will challenge them around all of that, so that they then have the ability to pitch their story. They're looking for advocates. They're asking others. They're being a little bold, and they're asking others to share that story with them and for them as well. Because I think the more people that you have telling your story, sharing your story, just helps along the path with all of that. So that's where we've often seen those with the greatest success.
Yeah, I love that thing, like, be bold, and maybe don't surround yourself by yes people all the time. You want those that can really give you, that hard feedback that can sometimes be really hard to digest, but it's obviously important. Do any of our other panelists have, some information or tips that they want to share on that question before we move on?
I might, if you don't mind, just talk
Not at all.
to, I did a little bit later on in my founder experience, but I went through the Springboard program, and it wasn't until then that I learnt that really refining my target audience and telling the story about a particular target audience was really important. So I wanted to be all things to all people. So I wanted to do aged care, insurance, disabilities, across Australia and then across the world, when I really should have been focused on one particular area. And when we did focus on one particular area, that is NDIS participants, that's when we really saw the traction start, and that the message was a lot clearer and easier to communicate. The second thing I learnt was that I really needed to tailor my, you can have those, you have a treat.
Thanks, Isabel.
Had it in the background. The other thing is there's a big difference between, the difference between pitching to someone that you know, and research the people that has someone, for me, that has a disability in their life, so a son or a daughter, versus someone that's really commercial and wants to make money out of the investment. So you can still, I think, use the same pitch deck, but you'll be kind of pitching in a slightly different way. So you do have to tailor your pitch dependent on your audience that you're speaking to. So the story is a really important part. And I think the final point I want to make is your personal story. So, and, that was mentioned too by Beck, but why are you in it? Not just for the personal piece. So I've got people in my family and, really close people to me with disabilities, and I saw the pain that they were going through and knew I could solve it. But also I've got experience. I was the general manager of a healthcare business for about 5 years, and I proved through that I could grow market share and be really profitable, and I knew my numbers as well. So so it depends on your audience how you pitch, but you really have to refine dependent on who you're talking to.
Yeah, it's just a great, piece of advice, I think, across the board with anything you do. Always niche down, talk to that one person. When you talk to everyone, you're sort of talking to no one. So, really, narrow in on that. Probably the question I'm most excited to ask, because I feel like you'll all have some really good pearls of wisdom, knowledge and insights to share. what do we need to put in place around us to get ready for growth, investment, partners, or crowdfunding? Kerry Lee, are you with us? Did you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, and I know some of the questions coming through are around this too. It's a journey. I liked what, Georgia and even Danielle has said. I always say ABR, always be raising, always be recruiting, because you're always, you're just always selling to somebody or you're being sold to, right? So you just have to figure out what, like Danielle said, what the pitch is, and that it changes every time. And also, I think the types of investors and what they're looking for changes, and the type of risk. So that's why I like the way you started with the funding model, because I think every stage of your business, you'll have a different funding model. As you get more advanced, you can use debt, for example. Once you've had 2 years trading history, the banks are obviously quite interested as well once you've got revenue. So you can use grants. Each grant has a separate reason for, its place in society. Governments don't give money away for free, and it's to stimulate those things. So if you're eligible for them, you've got to pitch and get ready to being your business to be ready for that. I think too many people go, oh, I've got, $20 in the bank account, I better go raise some money from somebody, and they don't actually understand that's not their problem, that's your problem. And people aren't looking for problems, right? No investor I know is going, oh, I'm looking to rescue somebody who's got $20 in the bank, right? So you've got to really think about what is your model long-term and short-term. And I think, as was already discussed, if you take venture capital or any of the sort of professional money, it is very difficult to get out of that. That will then set you on a venture capital course for the rest of your business until you exit. You will probably, unless you list, you're probably going to have to continue to take venture capital as a funding style, rather than if you go to a bank or you go through government grants, or you have cash from revenue in your business. Then you have different options to do those things at different times. So I just think I think people go, oh, I've got to go raise money again, and it's like, well, yeah, you don't just do it once. It's going to be a constant thing, and where it comes from is really important, and you need to think of it in the context of where you are at the time, not where you were. And the last thing I'll sort of say is, like, I've seen because I'm an active investor, and I have been for the last 6 years, I've seen pitch decks that came to me 6 years ago, keep everything very organized, and I see them come again and they've kept the same pitch deck and they're asking for double the money or triple the money, and you're a completely different business. Or if you are that same business, I'm not interested, right? You haven't really moved, but you still need money. So I think you really have to think about what is that growth journey, and are you ready to actually go out and pitch it, rather than just doing it because you don't have the money, and be ahead of it, and know that it'll take time.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about raising capital, what are the different levels? And I don't know if this is you, Kerry Lee, like if this is the best question for you as well, but yeah, what are those different levels of capital raising, and when would you move between the different ones? So that question has just come in on our chat.
Yeah, I think that it sounds like the person is assuming what I guess we call venture capital, which is a more formal style. And some people mentioned it before. I think Claire mentioned the seed versus Series A. Again, it's just the stage of investment, and you're there because you actually have different things to prove. So in an early investment, you have an idea and you need some money to either pay yourself full time so that you can actually stop your other side hustles, or to hire a key person to help start to build a business. Fundamentally, we're not really interested in investing in ideas. We're interested in investing in businesses. And then the stage of the investment is really bucketed to the stage of your business. So you might have one product and no revenue, but you might have 6 products and 1 revenue. Those would still be the same stage, right? It's because it's really based on the traction that you're getting, and then the reason for the capital. So there's a lot of things now when people talk about scale-ups. A scale-up can be anywhere from a Series A plus to Series B, but what it means is that you've got like a flywheel. You know how to actually make this thing work, and now you need the cash to come in to actually turn it a few times and actually get it flying. And so I think one of the challenges is that people go, I must be ready to raise Series A because I already did a seed, or I did a seed, and we're seeing stuff now where it's seed plus, because people are, we're not quite at a Series A, So I think it's really when you need to raise the capital when you need the capital to continue to prove where you are on your journey. And if no one understands where you are in your journey or why that's important, you won't raise capital. So it's kind of a bit, don't worry about the titles as much as worry about, the business and the stage of the business where you can actually responsibly take capital and then work out through investors and conversations where those should come from. Because a lot of the venture capitalists used to say they would only do large investments. Now they're coming in and doing earlier investments. So I don't think there's anyone that I know that just does seed investment, except maybe some early angels.
Yeah. Claire, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I did. I just also, so this whole VC world and everything, it's fairly new. People and women have been starting businesses for centuries. And I think that's something that is really easy to forget. I think where people now, especially perhaps the younger generation, they think if I start a business, it has to go through a VC, it has to IPO, it has to raise capital, it has to do all these things because that's what the media is very focused on. Whereas in fact, starting a business can be, that you can have a whole range of reasons for starting a business. And I do think that a lot of women start business for a purpose. They have a social problem they want to solve. They want to do something that's good for society as opposed to just a way to make some money. So I think that, these are things that you've got to consider, that how can I grow my business organically as well, like I would have perhaps in the older days. Your business is about, as Danielle said, start generating some revenue. You won't, perhaps you're not going to get yourself a salary for the first 1 or 2 years. What can you do to sustain yourself? These are things that I think are really important to think about also, that your business journey doesn't have to go down that VC typical route that we see now, because as a few of the panelists have said, that also can really limit you and pigeonhole you and also make your life very stressful in the future. If you can grow your business organically through starting with revenues, starting to get some debt, you will find that your journey will be potentially, it might take longer, but you'll be more in control of that journey. And that's also a very legitimate way to grow a business.
Excellent, love it. Linda, there is a word that I hear quite often sort of around this industry, and that is burn rate. Would you be able to take us through, what is burn rate, execution of that, and what that actually means?
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. I guess before I even answer the question around burn rate, maybe I might just sort of step back a little bit and just sort of recognize that there's so many great input that's being brought to all the panelists here, and everybody's bringing their lived experience around, their own experiences with their businesses and just their connections around how they've actually got their business off the ground. And I think it's so important to acknowledge that there are so many different factors to actually enable us to be successful in, the birth and the growth of our businesses. And so, through my own lived experiences and also by working with a range of different businesses and founders and entrepreneurs, I always like to sort of distill things down into sort of 3 bite-sized things, if we could always try and summarize, because there's just so much noise out there. There's so many different terms that we need to be aware of. So if I were to distill them down into 3 things, and then we can talk about the burn rate that sort of falls in that as well, is the storytelling, which we already sort of touched on. So, the very first thing is be able to tell a story. And when I say tell a story, it comes back to what a lot of the others have already resonated, which is about, the why and the purpose. Most businesses that can actually engage with people are able to say, why is it that they've set up the business? What's the purpose and why do they exist? Who is it actually for? And recognizing who that customer base is and being able to tell different stories depending on who you're talking to as well. So that would probably be my first point. The second point is about know what you need. And so when I say know what you need, it's not only just about, the people around you and your team, but it's about coming back to, well, what financial funding do I actually need, and how do I know when I need it? So by demonstrating an understanding of burn rate, and simply put, a burn rate is really about knowing how much money do I have in my bank account before I run out, in simplest terms, right? So to put it simply, you might sort of have X amount of money in your bank account, and by the time you pay wages and you pay all your operating expenses, which add up very quickly, by the way, you may only sort of say, I've got 6 months to survive. So when you're going out and actually seeking funding, whether or not, you're sort of looking at it from an organic growth by knowing how much revenue and sales you need to get into the door, or going out and getting a loan, a business loan from a bank. And Justine can, sort of talk about things about that, what you've seen there, or going out into angel investment, friends and family, which Danielle talked about, which is a great source. But I would also caution that, that there's a risk there as well when you're seeking money from friends and family, talking from experience as well. So it's just all those things that you need to sort of keep in mind. And then the third one is about execution. So have a really clear view about how you're actually going to get somewhere. So if you're going to go and seek funding, know how you're going to spend that money. And if it's actually an investment that you're getting from investors, they're going to want to know, how am I going to get paid back? So at what point are they going to be able to actually get a return on their investment, sort of thing? So, and I know that we're living in an environment right now where things are changing so rapidly, with COVID and the market and what's happening. And a lot of people might sort of say, well, we've just got to change tactics so often, but you can't change tactics if you don't actually have a plan. So a plan is there. It doesn't need to be stuck in stone, but it does help you prepare for risk and help you sort of manage that risk as well. So that's probably how I would sum it up, and in a roundabout way of actually answering your question around burn rate, Kim.
No, it's definitely a great answer, and just, knowing how much runway I think you have left, and how to work towards that and make sure that you're always extending it. How do we pick the number? Is bigger always better? How do we know how much we should be asking for? Is there any other panelists that would like to answer that one?
Yeah, I'd just like to add firstly that, and it's relevant to that question, what your burn rate or what you've spent on your company is not the value of that company. That's really interesting. I've had a lot of people I've spoken to say, especially people who are in the investment business, like VCs, whatever, say they have companies coming to them and say their company's valued at $20 million, therefore they want this much money to grow it. And the VC says, well, what are you basing that $20 million on? Is it, future revenues or whatever? And they say, no, well, we've spent $20 million to get here. You might have a business that's worth $2 million and you've spent $20 million. So you really, cash burn or burn rate is so important to understand what you're spending each month. Can you reduce that? Because that's not necessarily going to correlate to the value of your business and the money that you can realistically raise. We've had conversations when I went through SBE. There was a lot of conversation about women tend not to ask for enough money. We always, we're used to living off the smell of an oily rag and making lots of things happen and, multitasking and all that. And we have a sort of feeling that we can achieve things without raising huge money. I think that on the male side that it's more confident about, give me all this. So I think it's just understanding that the more you go out to raise, if you're raising it through debt, you have to pay it back. If you're raising it through VC or other investment ways, that means that they're going to take a bigger chunk of your business to give you that. So it's just that balancing act. My method has always been try and be as frugal as you can and, don't burn cash unnecessarily. To retain the value and integrity of your business, but other people may have different ideas. So,
yeah, lovely. Justine, again, love to hear your point of view coming from the bank. Do you have anything that you could add sort of around this question?
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. And probably it's been touched on a number of times by the panellists today, but very much whether it's an investor, whether it's a bank, we're making a risk assessment on your business. So we're looking at how, and that's not just from necessarily, the strong pieces of financials, so understanding those financials and what that longer plan term looks like, but it's also the understanding of the business, what the plan is, and what the short-term and long-term goals are around that. The other piece that really interests us is whether you've got good governance. And so whether that's whether you've got a board, whether it's just you, but that governance could be those people around you that you're seeking advice. So often with companies, and you know, it's come from a passion, that's come from an area of expertise. So finance, or if something's not your area of expertise, we always tell our businesses to go and get yourself a really great chartered accountant, go and get yourself some people that you know that you can rely on in the gaps that you may have. So very much in the pitches that you do and all of that, just think that is someone prepared to take a risk on my business and get the return on their investment. From a banking point of view, are you going to pay that debt back? The other thing too, from an investment point of view, when you're looking for funders, if you have had debt previously, good debt repayment is something that they're looking for as well.
Brilliant. I love it. Just moving on to the next question. I just want to hear some great, unique funding stories. You know, I know that you'll all have probably, you know, 5 or 6 of your own or someone else's, but yeah, if we could sort of share that around, maybe starting with Georgia, just to put you on the spot there, Georgia. Do you have any really good funding stories, whether it's yours or your own, that you could share with us?
I probably shouldn't share anyone else's funding stories. I mean, the lovely thing about the Springboard Network is, though, when you're going through an experience, particularly funding, which is stressful, we're really good at sharing and reverse engineering, you know, who's been here that can help me out. But I was really fortunate in my first funding story that I really was so naive and probably ignorant of just how hard it was. I studied entrepreneurship in the States and I came back here and I was like, right, I'm raising capital now. And I was just so confident that the people that I was pitching to many, many times over backed me. And so that then extended into the business. So I really think that confidence is key. Yes, you need to you need to know your business and your numbers. And just back on your other point, what I do first up, I've started quite a few businesses now. The first thing I do is create a financial model for it. And so for me, that's a bit of a working document. And I'll even get that up in a presentation. You've got all of your assumptions on sort of price, your volume, your costs and your expenses, and having a look at what, you know, playing around with that, so that you can bring people along on the journey, as well as the sort of standard business model and customers side of things. So yeah, so that my first one was really I would say it's lucky. I have no idea how I did it in the at that age, but there's a lot of money in Australia at the moment looking for a higher percentage rate of return, which is what startups and technology is. So yeah, it's different. I mean, my funding story now is that I'd done some business with Hyundai in my first company. So we actually had an office in Seoul. I wanted to get into agriculture. I finally found a farm that was sort of at a bit kind of depressed that I could expand. And then I pitched it back to Hyundai and their venture team sort of 10 years later. And that's now where my source of funding in this company. So the point about not burning bridges is absolutely correct. And in Australia, it's such a small community, and somebody that you might ask for help 10 years later might be the person that gives you $10 million. You just don't know.
Brilliant. I just I love the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. I don't know if anyone's played that game. Just how closely we all are related. It's a fantastic game. Danielle, your funding story, you sort of didn't look as far, at some point, did you? It was very close.
I think I looked far, but I wasn't successful that far. So, yeah. But I've got a number of kind of funny stories or interesting stories about raising. I mean, one of Paul's friends, for example,
love Paul.
yeah, who I've never met and I've never conversed with. I've never even had an email back and forth, but he said after receiving the deck and having a chat to Paul, could someone just drop by to come and pick up his $100,000 check kind of thing? It's like, does anyone even have checks these days? So that was just a really interesting thing after pitching 200 times that, you know, someone had read the deck, that had a good relationship with Paul, and Paul was able to pitch on my behalf. So that was just a really interesting thing that Paul was able to do that. And, you know, in terms of Birmingham Bridges, I've had, we'll call it Adam and Co, and another group that came in pretty early and wanted to invest in the NDIS space. And when I pitched and sent over my financials, Adam and Co came back and said, no, you're going to run out of money, you're not going to survive. And rather than getting offended, because I was hearing that quite a lot, I just continued to pitch. And then a year later, they came back and now they have invested at a much higher rate. So, you know, there you go.
Good on you. Yeah.
But yeah, so definitely do not burn bridges and don't get annoyed with people that don't want to invest at a certain point in time. They could very well be back, particularly if you do get the traction and hit those milestones. But then I've had a COVID experience as well. So when we went through the first wave of COVID and before we knew we were going to get JobKeeper, the company, you know, we're putting new people into people's homes, vulnerable people's homes. So it was BD for NDIS providers. So everyone at that stage kind of went, well, I'm just going to wait for COVID to be over in a couple of weeks. Back in March last year,
Yeah,
I'm just not going to bring someone in to look after my child with a disability. So we completely fell over. And it was my sister who knew I was really stressed about having to, one more moment, I'll be 2 seconds, then I'll give you another treat. But she was stressed about the fact that I built this team. I didn't want to cut anyone's hours or let anyone go. And she invested $25,000 to keep things going at that point in time. Then we got JobKeeper, which is lucky. But, you know, that was our smallest investment, but our most important investment at the time. So yeah, not a funny story, but an interesting story that, you know, sometimes you got to lean on those people that are closest to you to get you through. I was very, very lucky to get that from her. I had run out of money because I've done the thing where I've had to go to the bank every couple of weeks and take $5,000 out for weeks and weeks on end back in the day. Not any longer, but yeah. So there's a few of my funding stories, I guess.
Fabulous. I love it. It's so hard not to take things personally, isn't it? I think it's just a skill that I'm still working on, a muscle that I'm still trying to strengthen. Beck, I know you've got to have a great story. Did you want to pick one and share with us?
I just wanted to comment in terms of unique funding stories. I just wanted to highlight what we're doing at LaunchVic at the moment. I know that getting VC funding is not necessarily for everybody, and getting that sort of angel investing funding, you know, it's not necessarily a journey for everybody, but for those that are seeking funding through angel investments and seeking that early stage seed pre-Series A funding, we have a fairly unique model that we've recently launched at LaunchVic, which is the Alice Anderson Fund, which is a $10 million fund that's been established to co-invest with those angel investors at a 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 parts the angel investors and 1 part LaunchVic. We're really trying to solve this problem of not enough female businesses receiving funding. As the Minister referred to earlier, there's such a small percentage of funding going to females at the moment, and we're trying to take proactive steps to change those figures. So yeah, it might be something that the audience here would like to consider if they're currently raising angel investment, and our eligibility criteria are all available online. But yeah, it's a unique model that can help increase the amount of funding going to female startups. I think alongside that, I echo the sentiments around grants. I did see a question in the chat around grants, and I've got quite a bit of experience helping companies going through that grant application process. It can be a bit overwhelming. There are lots of grants out there. A good tip for startups that are looking for grants that apply directly to them, check out Luna Startup Studio. They have a great list of grants that are applicable to the startup sector. There's lots of industry specific opportunities that are available as well. But do your research and decide whether or not the grant is really right for you. It doesn't stop at just the application. There are ongoing reporting requirements that need to be fulfilled as well. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, it's that storytelling element comes in when applying for grants, and you need to be able to have a look at what the organisation, be it government or anyone else, is looking to achieve, and make sure that your responses are helping them also achieve their long-term goals as well.
Absolutely. Beck, just you mentioned something there that I sort of a little thread that I want to pull on, and this would probably be open to our whole panel. Do you see gender bias in the VC space? And if so, how can you overcome that?
So I'm happy to answer that in the first instance. I definitely think that there is a bit of a gender bias at the moment in the VC space, and we need to attack this from various angles. So we know that there are fabulous female founders out there. I think another part of the equation is also getting more females involved in investing. We need more diverse investment committees. We need, we're seeing movement in that direction. From a Launch Big perspective, we're really trying to grow the angel groups that are out there, and with a focus on diversity. There are programs like VC Catalyst, which have scholarships available to try and get more women involved in investing. But we definitely need to see more females getting involved in investment decisions, and not just females, but diversity, at large, because that is definitely going to help in solving this problem.
Absolutely. Any of our other panelists like to add to that? No hands up? Oh,
well, I'm just thinking, I was a golf caddy after I left university in Japan, and I think I need to get my golf skills back up again.
Oh my gosh.
I think
absolutely.
Networking, and after what Danielle and Paul have been sort of sharing.
Yeah, but isn't that what we hear though, is that a lot of it happens out on the golf course, in the pub, on the bar, like near the bar. We have to find those spaces for ourselves as well where we can have these conversations. I don't want to take up golf.
Yeah. I'll just also say, so the majority of our investors are actually women.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so people that I have known or have met through industry, so people that have had disability businesses or have their own business or run their own not-for-profit in disabilities, etc. So Paul's crew are great, and they have had a bit of experience in industry, etc. They're amazing people. But the majority of Carista's investors are females, and I couldn't get any money from male-led businesses or male investors in the early days. And I did have some comments along the way, like one group actually mentioned to me that they'd invest but they'll put their own CEO on because I had a couple of kids. So you do come across those types of things, but you just learn along the way that that's not the right investor for you, and that there's amazing people. I agree. I think more women investors would be. My investors are fantastic. When COVID happened, I got really lovely messages saying, if you need support, let us know, not asking for updates or anything like that. So that really suits my business and my style. So I would echo that. I think more women investors in the market would be fantastic for women. Certainly been the case in my business for sure.
Love it. Look, we've got just say 5 or so minutes. I thought we'd go into our chat and maybe ask a few questions if that is okay. And if you're as a panelist, if that's yours, just pop your hand up and say, yep, I can answer that one. We had someone type in that, and it comes back to that why and purpose. So we've been talking about the importance of storytelling, the importance of having your why. Linda or Kelly's asking, why are some businesses not interested in investing in an idea that's already operating? So more so that they're more invested in the money. They more want to know about the money. Like, are we putting too much importance on the why, do you think? Or do we just need to trust our guts and go, no, we need that part of it in there? What do you think? Do you think that those that are investing are looking at that really closely?
It is an interesting question. And, you know, I've come across a lot of different investors with different, I guess, passions. And at the end of the day, they are going to invest in one, you know, whether or not they're passionate about that space and believe in that space, you know, and want to support that space. Two, whether or not they think that the team or the founder is going to be able to execute on what they're telling them. And three is the financial one, which is the return on their investment, right? So I think those are probably the top things that they would tend to look at. So it comes back down to, if you can actually combine all those three things in your storytelling, then wow, what a powerful thing that you've got at the end of the day. So I'm not saying that, you know, the why and the purpose is the only thing, but it definitely goes a long way to sort of start the storytelling and get people to sort of listen to you, because that's how you're going to make that connection to either the investor or, you know, your customer.
I think also,
and I mean, that would take time too, wouldn't it? You know, to get that pitch to that point. It's not something that you're going to achieve, you know, right off the bat.
Absolutely.
Claire, you had something to add?
Sorry, I was going to say, I think investors, I mean, at the end of the day, investors are people. They're not robots, and they will have interests, as was just being said, but they also have their own knowledge, and anyone's going to want to invest in something they're knowledgeable in. So you might come, I mean, you know, insects, no one knew anything about insects. And, you know, a lot of people still not interested in insects, but slowly people are understanding more about it. And a lot of the companies that we're dealing with, or investors we're dealing with, have come from related industries, so waste or fertilizer or whatever. So that they get that part of the business. So for them, the story is important, because they've got to understand and have an affinity with that industry, or the reason for doing this business, because that they'll also have that from their perspective. That will be their driver to invest money. They'll want to invest money in things that they understand, and that they have an emotional affiliation with. The last thing you want is an investor that's purely about the returns, because you'll just have a nightmare with them.
Absolutely. So what have we got? Josie has asked, none of us have a crystal ball. I would love one. We would have maybe forecast that COVID wasn't going to last a week or so, and here we are 18 months later. But, you know, with a forecasted guess, like, how do you forecast something without sounding wishy-washy? Like, what elements could you bring in to make a really good case with your forecasting?
I might
Georgia.
That one.
Yeah, George.
Oh,
I think
sorry, Carrie Lee.
Yeah, no, that's
These are all lighting up.
I was just going to say, I should put my hand up, but I wasn't quick enough. No, I was just going to say, I think Linda mentioned it really well, which is actually about execution. So nobody believes you're going to actually hit the numbers. It's that you thought about what it needs to be to get to the next stage. Because it's either your business is going to go well, you know, so you're going to have customers buy your product, and it's going to go, you say you need 20, and what happens at 20 is you have enough money to not need any more money, and say you've got cash flow now and you're profitable. Then, you know, what happens if you don't get to 20, right? So it's this, again, it's kind of that story, rather than, you know, when I first pitched for money in the late 90s for my startup, it was we had to do 5-year forecasts, and it's just, you know, like, no one knows what's going to happen in 5 months, much less 5 years. But what we realized was it's actually the story of, if this thing goes good, so if you get 20, what if you get 100? You know, I think we tend to go to the negative. Often we go, oh, well, what happens if I don't get 20? It's like, what if you get 100? What if you get 200? What if you get 1,000? What if you get a billion? Right? And then suddenly that is then the size of the opportunity. So I do think that the forecasting is less about what Excel spreadsheet you use or what the revenue says it's going to be in, 10 years time. It's really about what does the one customer drive to your bottom line, and how many do you think you can get, and how much money is it going to cost you to get them? And then when you'll learn a lot by doing that, and then you go and do it again for the next raise, or you go to the bank and say, right, I've just spent 2 years proving you that this is a really great business. Come and invest in lend me some money to invest in this, keep this growing. So I think I think people get, talking about your financials, and I think Georgia mentioned it as well, it is just part of your story. And you've got to be able to talk about that execution of money, because that's what it returns. If you try to put, the markets at the moment, there's not a great return on cash if it's just sitting in a bank account. So people are looking to put it to work, and they're looking to use it to recycle their money to make your business grow. And so you've got to kind of just forecast that execution on the positive side. Like, I think one of the challenges that, and Claire mentioned, is you've got to see what happens if you get 1 million customers. Because if you're happy with 3, then investors aren't going to be compelled with the story. They want to know. They want to know that everyone in the world wants this product, or enough people want the product.
But also, you've got to be really realistic in your numbers, and so you've got to have in your financial model. You'll list all your assumptions, but also you'll need to have, and you only need a basic model, but you need to have either drop downs where you can change the figures, and so investors can play with it. So you need to have all your assumptions, and therefore the scenarios of different things. So you might have your assumption of your pricing in there. Well, what happens if a competitor comes in, or something happens to the market, and you're only going to get half that money for your product? So you need to have that in there as well. So investors can sort of flick a button in your model, and it shows that what happens if your revenue halves suddenly. And if your business can still break even or something, then that's good. If your business all of a sudden just drops dead and is in debt, then you're going to find yourself essentially with some problems. So you need to be able to have scenarios built into your model.
Sounds good. Georgia, can you expand on any of that for us as well, in terms of the funding?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan on the modelling and having those micro and macro effects that can happen to your business in there, so you understand your model and you can walk someone through it. If I look at the last 12 months, the reason I've gone into food is because everyone needs to eat, and so it's, for us, it's okay. Restaurants are closed down. What percentage of our business is exposed to restaurants? And I can model that out in 2 seconds, and then have a look at where people are being funneled to eat, right? It's supermarkets, which now makes up 100% of our sales. But if we weren't in the supermarkets, we'd then have to quickly go to the O'Malley spoons and those sorts of things. And so you just need to be really onto, if this happens, then this happens. If this happens, then this happens. And you know the flow-on effect to what's your price, what's your COGS to get you to O'Malley spoon versus onto the retail shelf at Coles. I'm just using food because that's my world right now. But, it's those things that you've just got to be really, really conscious of to be able to walk someone through. And I guess from an investor perspective, they can throw a million questions at you and you're able to walk them through as a business leader. Okay, this is what I would do, and this is what the effect would be on the business.
Fantastic. I think I have time for one more question. I'm going to be cheeky and ask it. Look, from Patrick, are there any tips on how to form the dollar figure that you're asking for? How do we pick that number?
Forecast.
Forecasting. Anyone else with a tip or some advice into that?
I mean, it needs to be based on you're not going to be able to, you've got to have a valuation. And I mean, that vow and the assumptions behind the vow really will dictate how much you're going to be able to raise and what sort of equity you'd be handing over. I mean, this is KL's spot.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, I think that this is the holy grail. It's really getting to the next value inflection point is what we call it, right? So, that's how much money you need to prove that A, you can take money and actually do something with it, and B, you've actually increased the value of your company with that money. I think those are the kind of the two drivers. And so I think if you're very early, you take as little as possible to prove that you're driving value, and then you take more and more to prove that you're increasing the opportunity, the market, the industry, the size. You're pivoting based on COVID, just like Georgia talked about. But I'd also think, I think people get a check in their mind, and I always say it's like a hammer looking for a nail, and they go around and try to hammer, $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. I need $1 million. I need $1 million. And the reality is, and Danielle will talk about this, you don't often get to $1 million with one check. You might get 10 people that write $100,000 checks. So you've got to also make sure that you're really thinking about that funding model. How are you going to get that money? When does it come in? Because if you get it over 12 months, for example, you're getting $100,000 a month, right? It's not trying to get $1 million. And, some of the stories we've heard is where companies have walked away from millions of dollars of customer revenue because they're spending all their time trying to get $1 million check from a venture capitalist when they've just told customers they're too busy to get $1 million in customer receipts because they were so focused they had to get $1 million that they actually missed that there was $1 million sitting over here. So I think it's really, you need to ask for enough to get you whatever you say you're going to do, but then it should just keep coming from different reasons, and you should be constantly looking at it and not just go. And again, we started at the beginning about the founding journey. It's every business and every person will have a different funding journey. So you can't just do one because your friends are doing it. Your friend's out raising $1 million, so you're going to go raise that $1 million. You've got a completely different business. So that's all I'm going to say on that.
Absolutely. Wow. I don't know about any of those that are joining us today, but I am sure you have a page full of notes. I have the privilege of sitting down with this panel last week. It was just an informal chat, and even I walked away with a page of notes, pearls of wisdom, just little bits that I can apply to any part of my business, actually. So, it's always a pleasure to be able to listen to women like yourselves and hear these stories and share your knowledge so that others can, go on their own path. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to Kim now, who I'm sure will wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for your insights and your guidance of our incredibly gifted panel. I've enjoyed every second of chatting with these women today, last week, and the whole journey up until this roadshow. So thank you so much for reining in the wild horses of information that we've had to do today. Very, very grateful. For everybody else, thank you so much for attending. As with anything in business, the people that surround you are often the best indicator of success. So we're very grateful to be surrounded by these amazing people today. A big, big, big thank you to our partners again who have supported this event. I'm looking forward to introducing you to them more when we send out the recording. So I will give you links to everybody that's been a part of this event. And we will send out the recording with all the glitches edited out. And we look forward to catching up with you and to learning about your specific journey and how we can help and making sure that your business becomes the success that it deserves. So thank you so much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you to the panel and all the speakers and all the partners. Bye.